Okay, good evening everyone. Erev Tov. Welcome back. Hope everyone had a great vacation, great break. I would say, Happy New Year. But that's going to be the subject of our discussion today. Of whether or not we can use the secular calendar. What does this mean? Can we say Happy New Year? Can we use the months of the non-Jews, January, February, March? Is this a problem? You're probably thinking, there's no way it's a problem. We use it all the time. So we're going to see all the sources today, Bezrat Hashem, on whether or not a person can use a secular calendar. And if time permits, we'll even go into another section on receiving tzedakah from Gentiles. So the first source is in Parashat Shemot, Sefer Shemot, Parashat Bo, which we're going to read in a couple of weeks' time. HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana. That the Torah commands us that the first month of the year for the Jewish people is that of Chodesh Nisan. That is the first month of the year is Chodesh Nisan. Says the Ramban, V'tam ha-chodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim. The explanation is sheimnu oto Yisrael chodesh harishon, that the Jewish people count this as the first month. Umimenu yimnu kol ha-chodashim, and that's how we count all the months. Sheni, Shlishi, first, second, third, fourth month, at tashlum hashana b'shnei masar chodesh, until we finish 12 months. Kedei sheyeh zeh zikaron banes hagadol, so that it's a remembrance of the great miracle. Ki bechol et shenaskir hachodashim yeh hanes nizkar. Every time we say this is the third month, this is the fourth month, then we're remembering the great miracle of happened of Yetziat Misraim. Ve'al ken en hachodashim shem b'Torah, and that's why there's no names to the month, because giving a name has nothing to do with the miracle. So we just say it's the third month from the month of Nisan, Nisan being the first, and I know that every time I say the third month, it's like Nisan, like I'm remembering the month of Nisan, the month of miracles. And he says here, Kemo shetiyeh zechira b'yom haShabbat. The same thing we do during the week Shabbat. B'imnutenu mimenu echad b'Shabbat, v'sheni b'Shabbat. There's no Monday, Tuesday. It's the first day of the week, the second day of the week, the third day of the week. From what? From Shabbat. Kasher afaresh, as I will explain. Kach hizkira b'yetziat Mitzrayim. And that's what the Torah says as well. Now, let's skip to the third paragraph. He says, Ukvar hizkiru rabotenu zeh ha'inyan, ve'amru shemot chodashim alu imanu miBavel. Now, the rabbis already mentioned that the names of the months that we have, the Jewish months of Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, so on and so forth, come from Babylonia. Ki mitchila lo hayu lahem shemot etzlenu. We never had names for the months. We never had names. We didn't have a Tevet. We didn't have a Shevat or an Adar. V'asiba bazeh, and the reason is ki mitchila yu minyanam zecher l'sinyan Mitzrayim. Like we said, the names of the months were based on the counts that we had, the first month of the year, second month of the year. But when we came up, or we returned from Babylonia, and we fulfilled what the Pasuk says, ולא יאמר עוד חי השם אשר העלה בני ישראל ממצרים כי אם חי השם אשר העלה ואשר הביא בני ישראל ממצרים חזרנו לקרוא חודשים בשם שנקראים בארץ בבל להזכיר ששם עמדנו משם העלינו השם משם. So therefore we changed to calling the months by the Babylonian names, okay, because this is fulfilling the pasuk that it's over there we stood and Hashem brought us up, and now we're out of the realm of Yetziat Mitzrayim, so now we can actually give names. Okay? So now this is what the Ramban says on the concept of how we got names. Comes the Shut Maharamshik, who was a student of the Khatam Sofer, and he says that we actually have a biblical prohibition to call a month by a Goyish name, by a non-Jewish name, based on this pasuk that we learned. He says, we'll read it in English. I received his letter in which I was asked regarding a tombstone that someone erected against the will of the Chevra Kadisha, where the tombstone was written in a foreign language, and the date was engraved according to the system which the Gentiles count based on the Christian calendar. His honor is in reference to the himself. The person asking, asked whether they may leave the tombstone there as is, or whether to cover it with cement, especially the Christian date written on it, or perhaps to dispose of this tombstone. All this I wrote regarding the issue of them changing the language against the will of the Gabaim to the vernacular, but what they did further by writing the date, like the new generation according to the secular calendar, this is a double transgression. For this calendar is not aligned with the calendar of Bnei Israel, and that which they concluded with the year of the Christian calculation is, in my view, a Torah violation. By writing a Christian date, January, where are we today? 8th, 2026. If you were to write that on a tombstone, says the Maharam Sheikh, you are actually violating a mitzvah deoraita, a biblical command. Why? That you cannot mention the names of other gods. And the likewise, that it's forbidden to say to one another, wait for me by a certain idol. And the fact that the Torah uses a causative verb, tazkiru, implies that the prohibition applies even if one doesn't mention the name of the idol explicitly. And then he says, here's the chidush. Hamoneh b'misparam nir'eh lefi anudati de'over be'iskur ahuv al Hashem elimachrim lo tazkiru. He goes, in my opinion, one who counts according to the calculation, which is based on the birth of that man, we all know that man is, okay? Transgresses his violation of the name of other gods you shall not mention. Because why else are you mentioning this date, this calculation? And that's his chidush. So according to the Maharam Sheikh, you would be transgressing a biblical mitzvah for even mentioning the date of the non-Jews. Comes the Yabia Omer, Chacham Ovadia, and he says, well, not so fast. He says, Nishalti odot hakotvim igarot michtavim lahabrehem. I was asked about documents and letters, v'kotvim hatarich leminyan hanotzrim, which write the dates of secular dates. Whether or not we should protest based on the mitzvah of do not follow their ways, or en bazei isu gamur. And he writes, she'en le'esor mishum chukotehem lo telechu ela be'echad mibet chalakim. A person who writes a secular date will not transgress an avera unless he writes it in one of two ways. Harishon huwa davar she'en tamo nigla kedemashma leshon chok. Either one follows them regarding something where the reason is not clear. כמו שפירוש רש"י והרמב"ן, שכיוון שהוא עושה דבר משונה שאין בו טעם, נגלה, אלא מפני שהם נוהגים כן, אז נראה ודאי כנמשך עליהם ומודה להם. If a person writes a date for no reason, then that might be following uchukotem lo telechu, because the purpose of what is a chok? According to a chok is something that you do for no reason, have no reason behind it. So the definition of chukotem lo telechu is that I'm writing something for no reason. But if the date that I'm writing on a document, or the date that I'm writing on a tombstone, or whatever it is to remind people of a person that died on that day, or when something was, then now all of a sudden there's a reason to it. So therefore, you wouldn't be violating that avera if there's a reason to it. That's his first statement, says Rav Ovadia. Hasheni hu davar sheshayach bo pritzut. The second way is when something would be done in the form of pritzut. And therefore, when you write the secular date, There's a reason for it. Because you want to publicize the date for those people who are Jews and those who are not. And there is no issue of pritut, therefore it's fine. And that's what he says in the bold writing at the bottom. There's no prohibition writing the secular date. And the people who are mekil have what to rely on it. But if a person doesn't really have a need for it, then he should accustom himself and train himself to only write the Hebrew dates. As the months that we have, he says, certainly here in Eretz Israel, where he's writing this from, in Israel, okay, you should write only the Hebrew dates. If there's a necessity, it would, then you could write the other date of the year. Okay, that's the thing. So I believe, listen, we write ketubot, and there's no English date on the ketubah. There's no need for it, right? There's no need for it. Now, some people want a translation of their ketubah, which is, again, not a valid translation of a ketubah. Does not have the proper, criteria to fulfill what a ketubah needs. So then people write on the 22nd of June, whatever it is, they'll write that. But on a ketubah, there's no. On a get, there is nothing. It's just the Hebrew date. That's what's required. Even the Tzitz Eliezer in number 5, he says, however, after further examination, it seems that one can say that the Maramshik, remember, Maramshik was the one that was very strict in his psak, only prohibited is because of the violation of do not mention other gods' names, where one explicitly says that this day is according to the Christian calculation. So meaning, if a person says, today is January 8th, 2026, according to the Christian calculation, that would be the problem. Using those words is the issue. However, if one does not conclude in this way, but rather just writes a day according to all the nations write it, this is no way violating mentioning other gods. There is only an issue, and that is a degradation that one abandons the Jewish calendar in favor of the Gentile one. But he said it's not an isur. Because you're not making a correlation between the date and that of of Christianity.
You say AD or BCE?
No, because that's before Common Era, but some people do translate it as before. Yeah, so that might be if you translate it like that, if you believe in that, then that could be an issue.
But what's defined as a Common Era? So even the term Common Era itself would be problematic.
Yeah. If it's all, that'll be a good she'elah. Because if it's all revolving around the existence of Jesus, okay, which is what BC, according to many, stands for, okay, before, I won't say the name, okay, then you have an issue. Because then you are indeed mentioning that, but we don't write that generally. When we write 2026, we're not putting AD, okay? But people that do source BC, it would be a good halachic question on whether or not you can even write BC and not write the Hebrew date. And then he writes, again, you should do your best to write using the Jewish date, which is the creation of the world, and not, however, when there's a business need, you can do it. Alright? Rav Asher Weiss also brings another reason why we can be lenient. And he says, furthermore, it seems that we were only commanded to make Nisan the beginning of months, and if we made another month into the beginning, we would be acting against the will of the Torah. However, the definition of a month according to the Torah is only in relation to the lunar calendar. And the months of the Gentiles are not considered months at all. And there is no prohibition by counting them. So it says to Rav Asher Weiss, if a person was to, when it says, Achodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodashim, that Nisan is the first month, we would be transgressing it if a person decides to say, oh, now Tevet's the first month. That would be a transgression of the Torah law, because we're counting by months of the moon. But the Gentiles don't use lunar months. So to count, to say that January is the first month of a solar year, okay, it wouldn't be an issue. He says, contemplate this. If the Gentiles decided to count according to weeks and not according to months, would it be prohibited to use their counting of the weeks of the year? He said, it seems there'd be no prohibition. And similarly, regarding the counting of months of the year, this is just a technical way of counting set periods of time. And that what they call months has no significance in halacha. Regarding the main issue, it would seem that there is another reason to judge the accepted minhag among many God-fearing Jews who are not scrupulous about this, using the Jewish calendar date favorably. For it seems that the primary definition of this mitzvah is that Nisan should be the beginning month in our eyes. But regarding mundane matters, there is no command to count it as the first month. For we have found a few times in Tanakh that the prophets used a secular date. Did they transgress God's will by not remembering the Exodus? Hence, it must be that it doesn't depend at all on usage. Rather, what we decide and give importance to when thinking of Nisan as the head of months. Therefore, when it comes to something of importance and dear to us, when there's no necessity to use a secular date, such as a wedding and Seudot Mitzvah, it's fitting to use only the date according to the Torah. But concerning checks, one does not have to be scrupulous to use them. And that's the difference. Right? However, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook argues, and he says, Abia et tza'ari utma'uni. I want to express my pain. Al ki berosh ha'chover muzkeret sefirat hadat notzarit, because I found at the top of a pamphlet a date of Christians, leolato shel oto posea Israel, based on that sinner of Israel, shasau nochrim avodah zarah, which made the Gentiles turn into idolatry. Bichlal yesh bazeh mishum lo taskiru. You have a prohibition of do not mention other gods, velo yishma al picha, and also be heard through your mouth. Mishum cherpa datit ulumit shel hamshech ol hagoyim atzavarenu, and for the continued religious and national desecration of the continued yoke of the non-Jews upon us. Says Rav Ovadia, one should choose the lesser of two evils and call the months by their secular names. Now we're going to have a machloke between Rav Ovadia and the Tzitz Eliezer. What's better to do? To call the months by the secular names January, February, March, okay? Or not to mention the names of the month at all, but say January is month number 1. So Ovadia says, it is worse to say that January is month number 1. Because we have a Torah that tells us Nisan's month number 1. So therefore, since the Torah tells us Nisan's month number 1, then if I say January is month number 1, I'm blatantly going against the Torah. So don't say 1, say January. Say February. March don't say March, don't say third month, say March. That's what Ovadia's Shita. The Tzitz Eliezer says the exact opposite. And he quotes Yabia Omer. והנה יביע אומר שהמציע שכותבים לפי מניינים להזכיר במפורש שמות החודשים שלהם ולא לכתוב בספירה של החודש הראשון או השני. Yabia Omer, Rav Ovadia says that it's better to mention the name of the month and not mention the number of the month. ואני כתבתי לו, I wrote back to him, דלפי דעתי להזכיר במפורש שמות החודשים שלהם הוא יותר גרוע. He says, when you say January or February, it's worse than mentioning month 1, 2, or 3. כפי ששמעתי בבירוש שמות החודשים שלהם מכוונים לשמות אלילים. Because where do they get the names from? Idols. When you're saying January, February, March, it's all in reference to names of idols. ויוצא איפה שדווקא כשמזכיר במפורש שמות החודשים שלהם, המזכיר שם עקום. ולכן עדיפה יותר שיכתוב בסתם במספרים השנה והחודש להם. He said, therefore it's better to write the month by its numerical representation. You know, you write on a check 0108, January 1st. January 8th. 0108, January 8th. And you that's what he feels is better. או יותר טוב, שיסיים בלשון, I don't know what that stands for, but better to conclude with the expression, according, or למניין הנוכרים, according to the accepted calendar. Meaning it's the accepted custom. By stating this, one achieves two things. One, he clarifies that one is not intending to follow the Christian calendar, rather the secular calendar. Second, as if one is apologizing for not using the Jewish calendar, so they should not be incriminated for abandoning the Jewish calendar. The note here below says it's noteworthy that all banks in Israel accept the Hebrew date as well as a secular date on checks and official documents. In addition, a law was passed in the Knesset that every official letter must have Jewish date. All right, so just to sum up, in our what we said according to Ramban, we have a positive mitzvah to use a Jewish calendar. The Mariam Sheikh says that anybody who uses a secular calendar is transgressing a Torah violation. The Yabia Omer and the Tzitz Eliezer says there's no prohibition according to the letter of the law, especially if you don't mention the Christian count. Rav Asher Weiss says that we should even judge favorably to those who use a secular calendar that use it for practical purposes. Rav Kook says, no, it's asur, you're not allowed to do it, it's a degradation. And for those who are lenient, we ended off with a machloket between Rav Ovadia and the Tzitz Eliezer on what's better. Rav Ovadia says it's better to use January, and the Tzitz Eliezer says it's better to use the month number 1. Okay? Good. Let's look at the second part of the shiur, receiving tzedakah from Gentiles. Now, you're not, Baruch Hashem, most people are not in the situation where they receive tzedakah from others, but certainly this affects organizations. Right? Oh yeah, it affects organizations where it could be that a rabbi or a president reaches out to somebody who's a CEO, who's got some money, he says, listen, I need a renovation, we're doing this, and can I receive tzedakah from a Gentile? I want to do renovation in a Bet Knesset. And your good buddy, he does light fixtures. But he's a non-Jew. But I know he's going to give me a good deal. He might even give it to me for free. Okay? If he gives it to me for free, tzedakah. So what is the issue to begin with? So let's look at the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, source number 10. Amar Rav Nachman, Ochle davar acher psulin le'edut. A person that eats the other thing. Rashi in the Gemara says that the other thing is someone who accepts charity from Gentiles, are invalid to be witnesses. Hani mile befaresia. When it says they're invalid, it's talking about when the charity is given in public. Aval betzina lo. But if the charity is given in private, he's not disqualified. Ubefaresia nami lo amaran. And when they said that you're not allowed to give it in public, meaning the guy is invalid for witness in public, lo amaran it's only said that he was disqualified when it's possible for him to be sustained in private. But he disgraces himself in public. He wants to receive tzedakah from a goy in public. But where it isn't possible, that's his livelihood. If he has no choice and he needs to live, and the only means that a guy has is a guy giving him money in public, okay, said there. Okay, basically here we have it's a chilul Hashem, where a non-Jew is forced to give money to a Jew, and the chilul Hashem is that the non-Jew is the one giving and not the Jew. So that's what the Levush says in source 11. What is the problem? What a disgrace. How lowly it is, this Jewish nation, that they don't support their own people. That they rely on non-Jews to go and give them money. That's a chilul Hashem. When the non-Jews start thinking of that, of what the Jew should have done but cannot do or does not do, and that is a chilul Hashem, and that is a problem. Gemara brings a story. Ifra Hurmiz, Ime de Shavur Malka. Ifra Hurmiz was the mother of King Shapur. He was King Shapur was one of the Persian kings. Shadra arba mea dinare lekamed Rav Ami velo kiblinu. The mother sent 400 dinar. It's a big sum of money to Rav Ami. He did not accept the money. Shadrinu kamed Rava. So she sent the 400 dinar to Rava. Kablinu mishum shalom malchut. Rava accepted it because for the sake of peace with the kingdom. It doesn't look good when you turn down money. She said, for peace, I'll take the money. Shamar Rabbi Ami ikbad. Rav Ami heard about this. Remember, Rav Ami turned down the money. Rav Ami heard about this. He got upset. Amar, he said to Rava, let leb be'avesh ksira tishavarnu nashim ba'ot meirot ota. Do you not hold of the pasuk, when the bows are withered, they shall be broken off, the women shall come and set them on fire? This is a nevuah by Yeshayahu in reference to the end of days, where the bows are going to be withered. That's the non-Jews. They have no fuel, they have no strength left. And therefore, the women will come and set it on fire. In other words, what he's saying is that by you giving the non-Jews zechuyot, by allowing them to give tzedakah, you're keeping the flowers fresh. You're not allowing them to wither because you're giving them merit. So it's a good point. So Verava, why did Rava accept it? Mishum shalom malchut, for the sake of the kingdom. Rav Ami nami mishum shalom malchut. Why didn't Rav Ami accept it for the sake of the kingdom? He says he should have distributed the money to the non-Jewish poor rather to the Jewish poor people. But Rava also gave the money to the non-Jewish poor. He didn't really give that 400 Jews to the dinar to his own people. He gave it to non-Jews. And when Rav Ami diikpadu delosimu kamei, Rav Ami got angry because they didn't tell him the whole story. Okay? So, that's the Gemara. Comes the Shulchan Aruch and says, Asur leYisrael litol tzedakah min ha'ovdei kochavim befaresia. A Jew is not allowed to take charity from a Gentile in public. V'im eno yachol lichyot b'tzedakah shel Yisrael. However, if he is unable to survive solely with the charity of the Jew, ve'eno yachol litla me'ovdei kochavim betzina, and he's not able to accept the money of a non-Jew privately, it is permitted. Says the Shevet HaLevi of Shmuel Wozner, Asur leYisrael litot tzedakah min ha'akum befaresia, ayem berishon leTzion gega betzina ika ksat chilul Hashem. Because even in private, there's a little bit of chilul Hashem. Inami mishum be'avesh ksira, we also had that pasuk we mentioned before. Ve'asur לא ליטול מן הגוי כל זה שיכול ליטול מישראל אלא דעניין פסול עדות הוא דווקא בפרהסיה. He says a person is always not allowed to take from a non-Jew if he has the ability from a Jew. The only issue that the Gemara spoke about was psul edut, was being valid for witness. In order to be invalid for witness, you have to take it publicly. Okay? Now, there are opinions that we're going to see now, especially the Tzitz Eliezer, that are a little bit more lenient. And then we'll conclude. He says, Betur technae rashei b'machon alev bebet hacholim Shaarei Tzedek. As head of the department of cardiology in Shaarei Tzedek, Heviu lefanai, they brought in front of me, that's what that stands for? Yeah, mitnadevet mechutz laaretz. They brought me a volunteer from the diaspora. שנודע לו שיהיה לו יהודייה. ונתעוררה על כן אצלו השאלה אם מותר לקבלה. Whether it's permitted to accept her, like it's a volunteer. We're not even talking about money now. This is a volunteer who's coming to work. כי הרי אסור לקבל נדבות מעקום. Because you're not allowed to accept charity from Gentiles. So he says, והנה בראשונה ברצוני להעיר לו, כי לשם השלמת תמונת. First, I want to bring your attention to have a complete picture of the case. השאלה היה צריך לברר ולכתוב לי לאיזו דת. First, you have to specify which religion is this volunteer from. נוכרית משתייכת המבקשת, כי בהלכה זאת של אין מקבלים צדקה מעקום, ישנה הלכה נוספת בזה ברמב"ם. Because this whole thing of not accepting tzedakah from a non-Jew is brought down in the Rambam. והיא לא בפרק י' מהלכות מלכים, הלכה י', שמחלק בזה בין עובדי עבודה זרה לבין בן נוח, שאיננו עובד עבודה זרה. הוא פוסק. The Rambam distinguishes between a non-Jew that is not idol worshiper. We spoke about this early on in this section. And one who is an idol worshiper. And he's posek sheben noach sheratzah la'asot mitzvah. If you have a ben noach, which means someone, a Noahide, who is not an idol worshiper and he wants to do a mitzvah, kedei lekabel schar en monin oto mila'asot kichata. We don't prevent him. He can do it. V'mevi olah, and if he was to bring a korban, mekablim mimenu. We accept a korban. Natan tzedakah, if he gave tzedakah, mekablim mimenu. V'nodin la'aniyei Yisrael, and we will give it to Jewish poor. So Tzitz Eliezer says that if a person, a non-Jew, gives of themselves, or an offering, or a donation, the one question and the only question you have to ask is whether this person is an active idol worshiper. If he's an active idol worshiper, then you can't take it. If he's not, then you could take it. Which really brings us to the discussion that we learned in the last shiur, which is, what is the status of a person who is a non-Jew, right? What if if he's a Christian but he doesn't practice? We already learned that Christians already are considered all idol worshippers. So that would be an issue versus just a non-Jew. So a Christian would be an issue based on what we learned last time. The last source we're going to learn is from Rav Dov Lior. He was a rabbi of Kiryat Arba in Hebron. He says, "Haim mutar lecha lekabel tmicha me'irgun notzre lemimush tochniyich be'Har Habayit." Can we accept money from a Christian organization for our work in Har Habayit? And he writes, I guess Har Habayit is an old mountain, and there are a lot of very holy mountains. Might be a lot of Christian organizations that want to donate money to preserve the mountain and the cemetery. He says, "En lekabel me'anotzrim shum tmicha bechol derech shehi u'chol matara shehi." One may not accept support from Christians in any way or purpose. Kavanatam badai la'azor le'am Yisrael al menat shebebo ha'et ya'aminu be'oto ha'ish. He says these religious Christians, why they're very pro-Jewish, they're very pro-Israel. I've met them. I don't know if you've met them. They're very, very pro-Israel. But their only purpose and reason to support Israel is because they know that if they do, this is only going to help bring that person back. Or it's going to get, they're trying to get the Jewish people to believe into that person. וכבר כתב על כך מרן הרב קוק. הרב קוק wrote שאפילו תרופות לאנשים חולים אסור לקבל מהם. Even medicine for sick people would be prohibited to accept. לאחרונה, and recently, הם גם רצו לחלק חמחב דפסחא. They wanted to distribute ma'ot chitim, which is money and charity before Pesach. ויעשה אחרוז שחיתמו עליו מספר רבנים. And a signed letter was publicized by a number of rabbis. וביניהם הרב הגאון הרב אברהם שפירא, שאין לקבל מהם שום תמיכה. Not to accept any of these donations. וכן נראה גם לעניות דעתי, and this is my opinion. Omnam, however, im yesh eno Yehudi sherotze litrom, but if there's a Gentile who wishes to donate, lo biglal emunat hanotzrut, not because of his religion, ela shehu makir Yehudim umechabed otam, but rather because he knows Jews and respects them, en isu lekabel mehem doron. There's no prohibition of receiving any donation from them. Yeah, there was. So that's in reality a lot of what we have today in terms of our organizations such as Lubavitch and others. They're relying on these two heterim. Number one, if they're not Christians, for sure you probably are okay with. But if they're doing it because they believe in what you're doing, or they respect and honor the Jew, then would be allowed for the person to or the organization to receive the money. Still, with that said, there are many organizations in the world that don't accept, and they don't accept taking money from a Gentile, and they'd rather, especially when it comes to religious organizations such as the Bet Knesset. You want your Bet Knesset to be donated by the members of the community, which has always been the custom amongst many synagogues and many communities in the world, and that was the first place that they give. Right? Veichuli teruma, part of the teruma that was donated was towards them, was the mikdash. Okay, of course, and there was a bedek habayit, which is the upkeep of the Bet HaMikdash and the Chal and the Mishkan, and certainly the Bet Knesset, and that's a commandment that we have. It's one of the donations. The word teruma is mentioned 3 times. One of them is for that purpose, and therefore, why would we want to give that opportunity away to a non-believer, right, or a non-Jew? So it definitely is something to think about. If anything, it puts more onus upon us as Jews to support our institutions, the ones, and they're all important, but certainly our Batei Knesset and Batei Midrash and Kolelim that require money from us, and we shouldn't have to resort to non-Jews to look for the money, because, like it's brought down, it might be Chilul Hashem. The moment that you have one non-Jew who says, why do I have to give? I don't even understand why I'm giving when they have their own money, right? That already becomes a chilul Hashem, and that's very murky waters. Yeah, 100%. So that's the story. That's our shiur for tonight. Bezat Hashem will continue next week. Wishing everyone a wonderful night.